Which statement is true regarding bearings used in high-powered reciprocating aircraft engines? There is less rolling friction when ball bearings are used than when roller bearings are employed. Master rod bearings are generally what type? Plain. A 9-cylinder engine with a bore of 5.5 inches and a stroke of 6 inches will have a total piston displacement of 1,283 cubic inches. Which statement is correct regarding engine crankshafts? Movable counterweights serve to reduce the torsion vibrations in an aircraft reciprocating engine. Grinding the valves of a reciprocating engine to a feather edge is likely to result in pre-ignition and burned valves. If fuel-air ratio is proper and ignition timing is correct, the combustion process should be completed when the exhaust valve opens at the end of the power stroke. The primary concern in establishing the firing order for an opposed engine is to provide for balance and eliminate vibration to the greatest extent possible. The 5 events of a 4-stroke cycle engine in order of their occurrence are intake, compression, ignition, power, exhaust. The operating temperature valve clearance of a radial engine as compared to cold valve clearance is greater. Which bearing is least likely to be a roller or ball bearing? Rocker arm bearing, overhead valve engine. Which of the following is a characteristic of a thrust bearing used in most radial engines? Deep groove ball. What is the principal advantage of using propeller reduction gears? To enable the engine RPM to be increased with an accompanying increase in power and allow the propeller to remain at a lower, more efficient RPM. A condition that can occur in radial engines but is unlikely to occur in horizontally opposed engines is hydraulic lock. The valve clearance of an engine using hydraulic lifters when the lifters are completely flat or empty should not exceed a specific amount above 0. The actual power delivered to the propeller of an aircraft engine is called brake horsepower. Which condition would be the least likely to be caused by failed or failing engine bearings? Low oil temperatures. A hissing sound from the exhaust stacks when the propeller is being manually pulled through indicates exhaust valve blow-by. An engine misses in both the right and left positions of the magneto switch. The quickest method for locating the trouble is to check for one or more cold cylinders. Before attempting to start a radial engine that has been shut down for more than 30 minutes, is to turn the propeller by hand 3 or 4 revolutions in the normal direction of rotation to check for liquid lock. The engine crankshaft runout is usually checked during engine overhaul and or after a prop strike or sudden engine stoppage. At what speed must a crankshaft turn if each cylinder of a 4-stroke cycle engine is to be fired 200 times a minute? 400 RPM. The horsepower developed in the cylinders of a reciprocating engine is known as the indicated horsepower. What special procedure must be followed when adjusting the valves of an engine equipped with a floating cam ring? Eliminate cam bearing clearance when making valve adjustment. What is the purpose of a safety circlet installed on some valve stems? To prevent valves from falling into the combustion chamber. What is the basic operational sequence for reducing the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller? Reduce the manifold pressure, then the RPM. Cam ground pistons are installed in some aircraft engines to provide a better fit at operating temperatures. Which statement pertaining to fuel-air ratios is true? The mixture ratio, which gives the best power, is richer than the mixture ratio, which gives maximum economy. Which of these conditions will cause an engine to have an increased tendency to detonate? High manifold pressure, high intake air temperature, and engine overheated. When will small induction system air leaks have the most noticeable effect on engine operation? At low RPM. To reduce the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller and operating near maximum BMEP, the manifold pressure is reduced with the throttle control before the RPM is reduced with the propeller control. What does valve overlap promote? Better scavenging and cooling characteristics. What is likely to occur if a reciprocating engine is operated at high power settings before it is properly warmed up? Oil starvation of bearings and other parts. Which of the following would most likely cause a reciprocating engine to backfire through the induction system at low RPM operation? Lean mixture. An unsupercharged aircraft reciprocating engine operated at full throttle from sea level to 10,000 feet, provided the RPM is unchanged, will lose power due to the reduced density of the air drawn into the cylinders. During the inspection of an engine control system in which push-pull control rods are used, the threaded rod ends should be checked for the amount of thread engagement by means of the inspection holes. Regarding the above statements, pre-ignition is caused by improper ignition timing, and detonation occurs when an area of the combustion chamber becomes incandescent and it ignites the fuel-air mixture in advance of normal timed ignition. Neither one nor two is true. Reduced air density at high altitude has a decided effect on carburation, resulting in a reduction of engine power by excessively enriching the fuel-air mixture. Which fuel-air mixture will result in the highest engine temperature, all other factors remaining constant? A mixture leaner than the manual lean mixture of 0.060. An increased manifold pressure with a constant RPM will cause the bearing load of the engine to increase. Excessive valve clearance in a piston engine decreases valve overlap. Valve clearance changes on opposed type engines using hydraulic lifters accomplished by push rod replacements. What is an advantage of using metallic sodium-filled exhaust valves in aircraft reciprocating engines? Reduced valve operating temperatures. When does valve overlap occur in the operation of an aircraft reciprocating engine? At the end of the exhaust stroke and at the beginning of the intake stroke. What is the best indication of worn valve guides? High oil consumption. If the ignition switch is moved from the position both to either position, left or right, during an engine ground check, normal operation is usually indicated by a slight drop in RPM. Standard aircraft cylinder oversizes usually range from 10,000ths to 300ths of an inch. Oversized in automobile engine cylinders may range up to 1/10 of an inch. This is because aircraft's engine cylinders have relatively thin walls and may be nitrided. Engine operating flexibility is the ability of the engine to run smoothly and give the desired performance at all speeds. Direct mechanical push-pull carburetor heat control linkages should normally be adjusted so that the stop located on the diverter valve will be contacted before the stop at the control lever is reached in both hot and cold positions. During overhaul, reciprocating engine exhaust valves are checked for stretch with a contour or radius gauge. If the hot clearance is used to set the valves when the engine is cold, what will occur during operation of the engine? The valves will open late and close early. The primary purpose in setting proper valve timing and overlap is to obtain the best volumetric efficiency and lower cylinder operating temperatures. If air is heard from the crankcase breather or oil filler during the differential compression check, what is this an indication of? Piston ring leakage. Valve overlap is defined as the number of degrees of crankshaft travel, during which both valves are off their seats. One cause of after-firing in an aircraft engine is an excessively rich mixture. One of the best indicators of reciprocating engine combustion chamber problems is a spark plug condition. When is the fuel-air mixture ignited in a conventional reciprocating engine? Shortly before the piston reaches the top of the compression stroke. Why does the smoothness of operation of an engine increase with a greater number of cylinders? The power impulses are spaced closer together. Which statement is correct regarding a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine? The intake valve closes on the compression stroke. Some cylinder barrels are hardened by nitriding. If the intake valve is opened too early in the cycle of operation of a 4-stroke cycle engine, it may result in backfiring into the induction system. If an engine with a stroke of 6 inches is operating at 2,000 RPM, the piston movement within the cylinder will be at maximum velocity 90 degrees after TDC, which is top dead center. What tool is generally used to measure the crankshaft rotation in degrees? A timing disc. An aircraft reciprocating engine using hydraulic valve lifters is observed to have no clearance in its valve operating mechanism after the minimum inlet oil and cylinder head temperatures for takeoff have been reached. When can this condition be expected? During normal operation. Some aircraft engine manufacturers equip their product with choked or taper ground cylinders in order to provide a straight cylinder bore at operating temperatures. Using the following information, determine how many degrees the crankshaft will rotate with both the intake and exhaust valves seated. Intake opens at 15 degrees before top dead center. Exhaust opens 70 degrees before bottom dead center. Intake closes 45 degrees after bottom dead center. Exhaust closes 10 degrees at top dead center. The answer is 245 degrees. Which of the following will be caused by excessive valve clearance of a cylinder in a reciprocating aircraft engine? Reduced valve overlap period. If the oil pressure gauge fluctuates over a wide range from 0 to normal operating pressure, the most likely cause is low oil supply. To what altitude will a turbocharged engine maintain sea level pressure? Critical altitude. A characteristic of dynafocal engine mounts as applied to aircraft reciprocating engines is that the shock mounts point toward the engine's center of gravity. During routine inspection of a reciprocating engine, a deposit of small, bright metallic particles which do not cling to a magnetic drain plug is discovered in the oil sump and on the surface of an oil filter. This condition may be a result of abnormal plane type bearing wear and is cause for further investigation. Excessive valve clearance results in the valves opening late and closing early. As the pressure is applied during the reciprocating engine compression check using a differential pressure tester, what would a movement of the propeller in the direction of the engine rotating indicate? The piston was positioned top dead center. What is required by 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix D when performing an annual 100-hour inspection on a reciprocating engine aircraft, a cylinder compression check. The purpose of 2 or more valve springs in an aircraft engine is to eliminate valve spring surge. What will be the likely result if the piston ring gaps happen to be aligned when performing a differential pressure compression check on a cylinder? A worn or defective rings indication. What is the purpose of a power check on a reciprocating engine? To determine satisfactory performance. When cleaning aluminum and magnesium engine parts, it is inadvisable to soak them in solutions containing soap because some of the soap will become impregnated in the surface of the material and subsequently cause engine oil contamination and foaming. Both are true. Cast iron piston rings may be used in chrome-plated cylinders. Chrome-plated rings may be used in plain steel cylinders. But you can't have chrome on chrome. If the crankshaft runout readings on a dial indicator are plus 0.02 of an inch and minus 0.03 of an inch, the runout is 0.005 of an inch. Compression ratio is the ratio between cylinder volume with the piston at bottom dead center and at top dead center. Increased water vapor, which is higher relative humidity, in the incoming air to the reciprocating engine will normally result in which of the following? A decreased engine power at a constant RPM and manifold pressure. What could cause excessive pressure buildup in the crankcase of a reciprocating engine? Plugged crankcase breather. Oil accumulation in the cylinder of an inverted inline engine and in the lower cylinders of a radial engine is normally reduced or prevented by extended cylinder skirts. Which of the following will decrease volumetric efficiency in a reciprocating engine? Improper valve timing, sharp bends in the induction system, and high carburetor air temperatures. On which strokes are both valves on a 4-stroke cycle reciprocating engine open? Exhaust and intake. On which part of the cylinder walls of a normally operating engine will the greatest amount of wear occur? Near the top of the cylinder. Ignition occurs at 28 degrees before top dead center on a certain 4-stroke cycle engine, and the intake valve opens at 15 degrees bottom dead center. How many degrees of crankshaft travel after ignition does the intake valve open? At 373 degrees. If the exhaust valve of a 4-stroke cycle engine is closed and the intake valve is just closed, the piston is on the compression stroke. How many of the following are factors in establishing the maximum compression ratio limitations of an aircraft engine? Detonation characteristics of the fuel used, design limitations of the engine, and degree of supercharging. Full floating piston pins are those which allow motion between the pin and both the piston and the small end of the connecting rod. During overhaul, the disassembled parts of an engine are usually degreased with some form of mineral spirits solvent rather than water-mixed degreasers, primarily because water-mixed degreasers residues may cause engine oil contamination in the overhauled engine. The volume of a cylinder equals 70 cubic inches when the piston is at bottom center. When the piston is at top of the cylinder, the volume equals 10 cubic inches. What's the compression ratio? 7:1. The floating control thermostat used on some reciprocating engine installations helps regulate oil temperature by controlling airflow through the oil cooler. Which of the following would indicate a general weak engine condition when operated at a fixed pitch propeller or test club? Lower than normal static RPM, full throttle operation. After spark plugs from an opposed engine have been serviced, in what position should they be reinstalled? Next in firing order to the one from which they were removed and swapped bottom to top. If metallic particles are found in the oil filter during an inspection, the cause should be identified and corrected before the aircraft is released for flight. Which of the following is most likely to occur if an overhead valve engine is operated with inadequate valve clearances? The valves will not seat positively during start and engine warm-up. If an engine cylinder is to be removed, at what position in the cylinder should the piston be? Top dead center. During ground check, an engine is found to be rough running. The magneto drop is normal, and the manifold pressure is higher than normal for any given RPM. The trouble may be caused by a dead cylinder. Backfiring through the carburetor generally results from the use of an excessively lean mixture. Which of these conditions will cause an engine to have an increased tendency to detonate? A high manifold pressure, high intake air temperature, and/or engine overheated. What type of check can be made to locate a cold cylinder on an engine? Operate the engine and perform a cold cylinder check with a cylinder temperature probe. How is a cylinder barrel checked for being out of tolerance? A cylinder bore gauge can be used to determine out of round and dimensional limits by measuring the cylinder at the top and at the skirt. Readings should be taken 90 degrees apart. Name some of the different types of piston rings. Types of piston rings are compression rings, oil control rings, oil scraper ring, square, wedge, and two-piece rings. What type of bearings are used in reciprocating engines? Plain, ball, and roller. What is the purpose and function of valve overlap? Valve overlap occurs when both the intake and exhaust valves are open at the same time during the last part of the exhaust stroke. This permits better volumetric efficiency, scavenging of the exhaust gases, and lowers the cylinder operating temperature. What may be the results of incorrectly installed piston rings on a piston? Excessive oil consumption, lower compression, possible damage to the cylinder walls and the piston. What is the indication of a leaky induction system? Low power and uneven running at idle, and uneven manifold pressure readings at idle.